Going to Harvard now?
I didn't think so.
Oh,
That's
the room where I started.
Oh, that's the rumor, I think.
I started that. So I'm Bon Clayton, the Christian co-chair of the group. And next thing we're going to do is pass around this list just to make sure that you are all on our list. And
We have to have people in the.
right, we're gonna, Henry and Sean, we're gonna pass this out to you too. I don't know how
They
you're
have to
gonna.
introduce them.
Anyway, yeah, Henry, you go ahead next.
Okay, Henry Gunning. I'm a retired pastor of the Grace Christian Reformed Church in Inver Grove Heights.
Sean?
I am Sean Thompson. I am a Muslim, and I am the or one of the head teachers at Sofa Academy in Blaine, Minnesota.
Where's that again? You broke up a little.
I'm sorry.
What city?
Oh, Blaine.
Blaine, okay. Farouk?
I am Mohammed Farouk Mia. I'm also a chemical engineer and chemist for those brothers, from University of Chicago.
And you're from Pakistan, right?
No, I have a long history. You don't want to hear that. I'm a refugee.
Okay.
You won't believe it.
Our father Abraham traveled around a lot too.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Okay. So next thing I'm going to do is pass this around. Please fill out your name and your email address and your phone, just in case I can't read your email address, because I want to be sure that you're on our list. If you are already on the list and you know that, please just put your name down.
Hey, Brian, I do have a question. Why, I always get 3 notifications from you every time I get something. Why is it always 3?
It's hard to know who's on which list anymore.
Oh, okay, I was just wondering.
Yeah, you're on, well, I send it out to our commercial list through our commercial list email supplier. And that's basically the list that I got from the Minnesota Council of Churches when they decided not to sponsor anymore. I send it out to another list, which is kind of complicated, which I got from them of all the people who unsubscribed from their list, from this mail list. And then I keep adding. So you're on that one too. And then there's this national list, the Muslim Christian National Dialogue. You're on that.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense.
It's hard for me. It's a volunteer job, hard for me to pay perfect attention to all the details.
Okay.
But
Well,
the
you're trying to be
people-
critical. I just was
The
wondering.
people who say they want their name off, I take care of that.
You should put small differences for you to find, like a game, and it's fun, right?
So today, we have a very important religious topic, which obviously is at the center of our culture and our secular thinking. But it's also, I shouldn't say all of it. It starts out with God creating male and female. So let's get started with Bob Brenneman and the Christian paper.
Well, say assalamu alaikum and peace be upon you. Don't take this off my time here, or but one of the things I always tell myself, why do Hindus have a nice greeting, namaste, and Jews have shalom, and Muslims have salam alaikum, and Christians have a what's up, howdy. Why don't we have a peace greeting? It bugs me to no end. We represent the Prince of Peace, and we don't have a peace greeting. So I don't know why, but one of these days we have to find one that we use.
Yeah.
I always said, if you go like this, peace, they think you're a hippie from the 60s or something. So anyway, that's I had to get that off my chest. Well, let me go ahead and read my paper. We could probably stop the whole time on the first comment, the kind of joke, to discuss that for a long time, but I'll move on beyond that. Many years ago, comedian Johnny Carson, in his opening monologue, a well-known psychologist have a sexual thought flash through their minds every waking. Carson thought to himself, that's ridiculous. But then he joked, a moment really hit me. And then a moment later, it really hit me. What do I think about the rest of the moment? In other words, men are bombarded a lot of times with sexual thoughts. We want to think about God, but sometimes let's face it, we get sexual thoughts a lot, don't we? We battle against that. We battle against lust. We battle against all these things. And yet Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So it's a struggle sometimes to maintain a pure heart. I think that means seeing God in this life and in the next life. It's eternal, but it's also God. If we want to see God in all his glory, we need a pure heart in this life as well. I would bet that each of us in this room or on Zoom could think of many stories in which a priest, a pastor, an imam, or just the average Joe or Jennifer, or average Ahmet or Aisha, whose lives were tragically ruined by sexuality outside of what are mutually shared boundaries for human sexuality. I think we could all think of people whose lives have been pretty well ruined because of something that happened outside of the sexual boundaries of both of our faiths. So I have a diagram here that did not come across on the when it was sent out, but hopefully you can see it here. Images, ideals, realities on the. In comparing cultures or religions, I often follow a simple chart that I learned from Dr. Gerald Fry in my doctoral work at the University of Minnesota. When comparing and contrasting two cultures or religions regarding a specific issue, as we are doing today, we need to compare fairly. Too often, Christians and Muslims have compared their respective ideals with negative images of the other. No. I spent most of the 1980s, 1990s living in the Middle East. This was the era of television programs like Dallas and sexploitation movies about teenagers losing their virginity. A lot of movies like that were coming out during this time period. And all the movies are shown in Turkey like this, as much as they are shown here. I mean, all the cinemas and TV and everything else is just as much there as there's here. I remember a Madonna concert shown on Turkish television that still makes me cringe, which showed the singer betraying a sex act with two men dressed as priests and lesbian acts with her backup singers. Very, very graphic it was. What made me cringe? The huge cross between Madonna's virtually naked breast. I was often asked during those years questions like, are there any virgins left in America? Do all American men have mistresses? The word decadence perhaps best captures the image of sexuality in the so-called Christian West by many in the Islamic world. The image that most American Muslims cringe at the portrayal, I imagine that most Muslims cringe at the portrayal of sexuality in their world as well. Honor killing, FGM, female circumcision, child brides, and jihadi groups like ISIS raping and killing are negative images of Islamic sexuality as portrayed by the media. Many Turks and Kurds whom I befriended or were students of mine were surprised to hear me say that there are many Christian girls and even guys who are saving themselves for marriage. They couldn't believe that. They had a hard time believing that because of the images on media. I am sure that Muslims would like Christians to know that the honor killing, FGM, child brides, etc., are not the norm in the Muslim world. Ideals. So that was the images. Now let's look at ideals. That at the beginning, the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. The Catechism of the Catholic Church states, for man is created in the image and likeness of God, who himself is love. Since God created man and woman, their mutual love becomes an image of the absolute and unfailing love with which God loves man. It is good, very good in the Creator's eyes. And this love that God blesses is intended to be fruitful and be realized in the common work of watching over creation. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it. For the sake of space, I will not cite long portions of Proverbs, the Gospels, 1 Corinthians 7:13, and many other scripture portions. Wives are admonished to submit to their husbands, but husbands are commanded to love their wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, Ephesians 5. In a nutshell, the ideal of Christian sexuality is for a man and a woman to commit themselves to God and to each other for life. to enjoy and to give of themselves fully to the other, which includes giving of themselves sexually. The wife is to respect her husband, even as the husband is to love his wife, and give himself to her as Christ gave himself for the church. When I say church, I think you know I mean people. I don't mean buildings, obviously. Which is called the bride. There's also a calling for those who remain celibate and are married to Christ in a special way that's beyond the scope of this paper. I'm talking especially about priests and bishops and others that are remain celibate for the sake of the kingdom. Amy Bird writes that the church has missed what John Paul II called the very glory of the human body before God, and the very glory of God in the human body, through which masculinity and femininity are manifested. All right, now that's ideals. Now let's look at realities. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. This is kind of old English, but I like that rhyme. Leave, cleave. Notice it says leave, then cleave. Way too often, people do the opposite. They want to cleave and then leave, which leads to immorality and what the Bible calls fornication, or sex outside of the husband-wife relationship. The Bible is full of characters who violated God's original ideal. The story of Noah and the flood, the destruction of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, Potiphar's wife trying to seduce Joseph, the orgy of the children of Israel at the golden calf, the tragic story of Samson, the strongest man who ever lived, reduced to blindness and slavery by succumbing to Delilah's seduction, David's adultery with Bathsheba and the virtual murder of her husband, Solomon's 700 wives and 300 concubines, leading the wisest man who ever lived to worship idols and exploit his own subjects. I think everybody here probably is familiar with those English words, but just in case, we know Joseph is Yusuf, Samson, Daoud is David, Suleiman. I think if those words, if you're not familiar with the English equivalents for some. Love is not something you feel, it's something that you do. A quote by David Wilkerson. To love is to will the good of another, Thomas Aquinas. Too often we think of our bodies as less than our souls, which are the truest part of us. The sexual revolution has capitalized on this mindset. Our bodies are reduced and objectified, sex becomes entertainment, and gender becomes our choice. As we talk about choosing your own gender, is happening in America now. And yet we are full of pain, abuse, and dysfunction. Perhaps nothing in our culture has been more distorted than how we tend to understand love. Love has come to mean something that happens to you. It's something that you fall into or something that you fall out of. How many movies and songs are about the struggle between what one should do and what one's feelings want him or her to do? The oft-sung phrase, "You can't be wrong if it feels so right," is way too reflective of our culture. I think that's true of cultures around the world. It certainly is true of the cultures I lived in the Middle East. They had the same problem. So what you should do and what you feel like doing. I think that's kind of a standard human problem. In Greek, the language of the New Testament, there are 4 words for the English word love. Philia refers to brotherly love. The type of love between close friends demonstrates care and willingness to help out in any circumstance. Husbands and wives should be close friends. Storge, unconditional love within one's family. The type of love should grow as children come along and as the years pass by. Eros, romantic, passionate love, often referring to sexual attraction. The kind of love that people fall into. This type of love will fade somewhat, but husbands and wives need to work at blowing on the charcoals or ashes to keep them burning. In other words, you don't want to totally let all romantic love die. But just don't want it to control you, in other words. Agape is an unconditional love that seeks the highest good for the other, demonstrated by God toward humans. I heard the story of 2 men who both had their faces burned beyond recognition in the Vietnam War. Recovering in the Veterans Administration Hospital, the VA hospital, one of the wives saw her husband's burnt and broken face and never came back to the hospital. The man later committed suicide. The other man's wife kissed him and joked with him. "You were never all that good looking anyway." He went on to become a world-renowned evangelist named David Reaver, met personally. I hope the application is obvious. Eros, without agape, is like love being something you feel rather than something you do. but between a husband and a wife, eros and agape, are both essential, as are philia and storge. Donna Freitas, in her book, Sex and the Soul, shares the results of her very in-depth research among university undergrad students. She compares students at 4 types of universities: large state-sponsored, private but non-religious, Catholic, and evangelical universities. One thing that stood out to her was how many students say that they are spiritual but not religious. I would be curious to know if you hear that much in the Islamic community, when people say they're spiritual but not religious. You hear that phrase very often, as it's said quite a bit now in Western culture. This seems to be a way of being able to violate a particular religion's sexual boundaries while still holding on to some type of belief in a higher power. She said that most students at Catholic and non-religious schools keep religion and sex separate, which is not true of evangelical students, who tend not to separate those into 2 opposing forces. In other words, evangelical students have maintained their idea of sexual purity until marriage, while only a small remnant have maintained this at the other types of institutions. Space prohibits me from going into detail about other types of sexual acts outside of intercourse. I don't think I have to spell out what I mean by this. There's obviously sex outside of intercourse as well. She says all the participating colleges and universities, women and men alike, regardless of religious affiliation, tend to disassociate romance from sexual intimacy. They understand romance as pure, as chaste. She says, and this is so interesting to me, I was even more surprised to learn how powerless they felt to change this culture that made them so unhappy. At least before they realized that the person next to them and the person next to that person wished that he or she could change the thing too. Freitas further states, equally important, almost none of the students in whom I spoke see the random hookup as anything approaching an ideal. I think we don't know what hookup culture means. It's a quick sexual encounter without love and commitment. They don't see it as ideal. The overwhelming majority of students say they prefer romance and relationships, but in public, students are complicit about hookup culture. In other words, when you interview them deep down, they wish they could go back to, maybe they wish they could have a more romantic and lifetime commitment, but they don't see any change, any way out of what the present dilemma is of just lust and so on. The good news is that despite almost most humans perhaps having failed to reach the ideal, what God had intended for the human sexuality, Jesus brings redemption and healing to even the most fallen. The Samaritan woman at the well, who had 5 husbands and was living with another man who was not her husband, finds joy after Jesus tells her to drink the water he gives, and she will never thirst again. She becomes an evangelist of the gospel. The woman caught in the very act of adultery is rescued from being stoned when Jesus tells the crowd of potential executioners, let him who has not sinned throw the first stone. According to her tradition, that woman was Mary Magdalene, the first person to witness the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba are 4 women with less than perfect sexual histories, yet each has a place in the genealogy, the only sinless man who ever lived, Isa al-Masih, or Jesus the Messiah. Throughout 2,000 years of history, countless men and women have been redeemed, cleansed, and purified by believing in Jesus. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us of our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. Song of Songs, the convergence of spirituality and sexuality. In the Bible, there's a book called the Song of Songs. Exactly when it was written is debatable. Many scholars say it was written in the post-exilic period after the Jews returned from exile, while others say it was written by Solomon. Yet it is inspired text. On the surface, it is poetry that resembles the love poetry in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. The Song of Songs is an account of a relationship between a male and a female singer and a female chorus. Some commentators suggest it should only be read as erotic love poetry. Others, such as Watchman Nee, the Chinese Bible teacher who spent 15 years as a prisoner in a Chinese labor camp, understood the book exclusively as an allegory of the relationship between Christ and the church, or Christ and the individual believer. I think most of the church fathers, like St. Bernard, historically and theologians today say it was poetry that uses sexual imagery to describe the relationship between God and his people, Israel in the Old Testament, and Christ and his bride, the church in the New Testament. In other words, there is a convergence in the book between spirituality and sexuality. The woman sings, my beloved is to me a statue of myrrh resting beneath my breast. I ought to sit in his shade, and his fruit is sweet to my taste. His left arm is under my head, and his right arm embraces me. He says, your breasts are like two fawns of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. I will climb the palm tree. I will take a hold of its fruit. Make your breasts be like clusters of grapes on the vine. The fragrance of your breath like apples, and your mouth like the best wine. The above is a small taste of the encounter between a man and woman deeply in love. It speaks of the longing that Christ, the bridegroom, has for those who are his bride, and how the bride should long to be in the arms of her bridegroom. I close with these two citations from Amy Bird in her book, The Sexual Reformation. Therefore, joy in marriage will not be found in earthly spouses or in mind-blowing monogamous sex, but in what marriage itself points to, our true bridegroom, Jesus Christ. He is the spark of our desire. If we get that, then we have the proper gratitude and enjoyment for those gifts in singlehood and marriage, as well as the proper lamenting when rightfully oriented desires are thwarted and unrequited, and repentance when they go off course and are tainted and disoriented by our sin and brokenness. Are we perhaps guilty in our theology of holding a Savior who gave his whole life for us, but not seeing him as the groom who desires and delights in us? In the song, this book we're talking about, Song of Songs, we not only see his desire, but his desire arouses our own. And we long for that day when we will consummate that desire. We long for him because he first longed for us. Some Sufis, I've read some Sufi Muslim literature, draw upon verses in the Qur'an and the Hadith to describe the relationship between God and those who submit to him in intimate terms as well. See Saeed Hussein Nasser, The Garden Truth, and James Fadiman and Robert Frager in Essential Sufism. So that's what I run to write about. The closing is a little bit, maybe a little hard to understand, but it's the idea of Christ and the believer, a fulfillment or a way of expressing that in rather graphic terms, but describing the relationship between Christ and the bride. So that love poetry is used to describe that.
Thank you, Bob. Very good. Sean, are you there?
I am. Yeah. Question before I start, was Bob's paper sent out via email, or did I miss it, or?
I sent it out. Yeah, I don't know why some people didn't get it.
Okay.
I wasn't able to double check that this morning because our power was off. I couldn't connect with the Wi-Fi.
Oh, I didn't get it all. You didn't all get it, Sean, at all? My paper?
I didn't get it, no.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah, I would like to read through it. If somebody could send it to me, I would appreciate it.
not possible.
Need to have a copy, email.
Well, you didn't get it either.
I didn't get email either.
I got it.
Can you email to Sean?
I might not be able to do it till tomorrow. I don't know if the Wi-Fi is gonna work today.
I didn't bring my computer with me, or I would, but I didn't bring it.
What is Sean's email? Well, I can try.
Sean, can you tell your email?
Yeah, S Thompson, THOMPSON at Contemplari, CONTEMPLARI.life.
Not
You can also put it in the chat.
right. I'll try and send it.
Yeah, is it possible to email him now?
Yeah, I'll do my best. If I can't, I'll let you know.
Okay, should I go ahead and get started?
Yep.
Okay,
You might, oh yeah, go ahead.
Here we got this one then.
all right. So I'll skip over some of this and just kind of give us a summary of the sections that I skip over. So I started off with a benediction, basically a prayer And then I went into definitions. I am a big fan of definitions and especially etymology, the etymology of words. So when I do research or when I talk or write about something, it's usually something that I look into. And so I'll skip past all the particulars here, but we can go to the summary of the etymology. The word sex appears to be closely related to the word sect, which is a division of something. We see above as a division or half of the race of humanity, which appears to be the original meaning. Coming a few centuries later is the idea of copulation or intercourse as something done by the two sexes. Hence, we have two basic meanings. One, of or related to gender, and two, of or related to copulation. From the summary of the etymology of the words sexuality and sex, it is apparent that there are two aspects of sexuality, that of gender and that of copulation. Following a brief remark about copulation, this paper will focus on the aspect of gender, specifically the aspect of gender from the perspective of the religion of Islam, God willing. This is for two reasons. One, we talked last time, or last time I was there anyway, about doing a presentation on asceticism, and I think copulation is better addressed there, especially when juxtaposed with Christian asceticism. Two, gender is at present a topic of utmost importance, as it is an issue many are grappling with not only in themselves but also amongst each other. Finally, as some additional notes, the full context of the verses, so verses that I provided from the Qur'an, I provided the full context related to various aspects so as to provide a full reading and presentation. Also, the issue of gender is a recent phenomenon, as can be seen from the definition section. Historically, it wasn't interrogated by scholars much. Rather, they were concerned with the lived reality of gender and how Islam seeks to honor each. Lastly, I have tried to keep this as a descriptive piece, not engaging in comparison or argumentation, though there is a basic argument that necessarily flows through. So on to copulation. We'll start off with some verses from the Qur'an. The people of Lot cried lies to the messengers when their brother Lot told them, "Will you not be God-fearing? Verily, I am a messenger to you, tried and true. So fear Allah and obey you me. I ask you no wage for it. Verily, my wage is but from the Lord of all worlds of beings. Do you come in lust unto male after male, of all those you could wed of the whole world, and disdain those your Lord has created for you, of your wedded wives? But you are a people who exceed all bounds." They said, "If you cease not, O Lot, truly you shall be of the banished in disgrace." He said, "Verily am I of those outraged at what you do. My Lord, deliver me and my household from the blight of their deed." And we delivered him and his household all together, save an old woman among those left to destruction. Then and more, we laid the others utter waste, and rained down on them an unheard of rain. So evil indeed was the reign of those forewarned. Verily, and that is a tremendous sign, yet most of them are no believers. And verily, your Lord, he indeed is the invincibly omnipotent, the all-compassionate. And I provided the reference from the Qur'an here after the verses. There are two aspects to copulation that should be addressed from an Islamic perspective, one of sexual mores and the other, which only needs to be separated due to our contemporary context, of heterosexuality. As can be inferred from the above verses, homosexuality, specifically concerning men, is explicitly forbidden in Islam. By analogy, and according to the consensus of the majority of scholars, anything other than heterosexual intercourse and or intimacy is also forbidden. Along with that, the punishment for inappropriate sexual behavior, whether heterosexual behavior, fornication, or adultery, is either whipping or stoning to death, and is to be determined by the judge and implemented by the sultan, vigilante justice being strictly prohibited or prescribed. That being said, the caveat of having 4 witnesses testify to having witnessed actual penetration must be mentioned. Needless to say, this is an extremely high bar. Having 4 witnesses would nearly necessitate the act being done publicly, which obliges mention of the distinction between public and the private space. Historically, the public and the private space have been distinct areas of executive authority. Broadly speaking, privately, do as you wish, while in public, one is expected to maintain the mores of a Muslim society and remain within the bounds of the rulings of the scholars of Islam. A last word will be mentioned regarding the contemporary attempts at legitimizing heterosexual behavior in Islam. While there is always room for reinterpretation of scripture, this has and forever must be done according to the process of discerning valid differences of opinion. Opinion being the scholars' attempt at best understanding God's law. Classically, the scholars have maintained a consensus that the above verses and the reason for the punishment regarding the people of the prophet Lot was homosexual behavior. The modern attempts lack this requisite knowledge and process. And now concerning gender. And God says in the Qur'an, and by that which created male and female. The issue of gender is an issue that relates to the cosmos and specifically duality that exists in the cosmos. As such, an attempt will be made to present gender in a view that descends from the cosmos to the individual. According to a traditional hierarchy of the cosmos, we find creation ordered with respect to other creation, all ultimately under and distinct from God. From the bottom, there is the mineral kingdom, then the plant realm, then the animal realm, and then the angelic realm, which is superior to all as the obedient servants of God. Or are they? Another interesting way of looking at this is through the Platonic tripartite soul, widely appropriated by all 3 Abrahamic faiths. Plato posited a soul that is of 3 parts, the concupiscent, the irascible, and the rational. The concupiscent soul is appetitive in nature and seeks to fulfill its base desires and aligns with plant life, in which plants perform only the basic functions of life, eating, procreating, and sleeping. The irascible is emotive in nature, such that in addition to satisfying the basal desires one sees in animals, that they are emotive and communicative. While humans have basal desires they seek to fulfill and emotions they wish to express and communicate, they are also rational and have been termed the thinking animal. Interestingly, absent from the aforementioned hierarchy are 2 of God's creations, man and jinn. And God says in the Qur'an, nor have you created jinn and man but to worship me. Let us leave aside the jinn, as there is not much known about their creation. Concerning man, though, we know quite a bit. Man is the meeting place of the angelic and the animal realms. This is the human essence, as some of the greatest philosophers of the Islamic tradition have taught us, from Al-Raghib al-Isfahani and Al-Ghazali to Shah Waliullah. This places man in a unique situation with respect to the hierarchy. Man can order himself to be worse than the animals or better than the angels. And this is so because man has been given free will, the ability to choose. Hence, man chooses a life of obedience to God and becomes better than the angels, or he chooses a life of worshiping his basal desires and lowers himself below the animals. And God says in the Qur'an, have you beheld him who takes as his God his own headstrong fancy? This further places man in a singular position with respect to his duty in this world. Man's duty is that of a noble reigning deputy in this world, and among the creation of God. Such a duty can only be accomplished by man's choice to obey his creator, his choice to master his urges and desires by the use of his rational faculty, and ascend the ranks that far exceed those who sing the praises of God day and night. And God says in the Qur'an, and remind them when your Lord said to the angels, I shall place a noble reigning deputy on earth. They said, will you place in it one who will wreak corruption in it again and again and spill much innocent blood? While we extol your infinite glory and praise and your exalted pure perfection, he said, verily, I know what you know not. The duality that exists in this world is highlighted throughout the Qur'an, and the duality of gender pervades this world. It is present in the plant kingdom. It is present in the animal kingdom. Exceptions notwithstanding, gender surrounds us. And as human beings, we are created with gender. The masculine principle demonstrated in the bestial nature of animals and that of the lower self of man, and the feminine principle present in the angels of mercy and that of the refined self, combine in man to be the perfect, noble, reigning deputy, the deputy that is just through his mercy, through his majesty, and compassionate through his mercy, nobly reigning by use of the gift that is the rational faculty that orders his self and orders creation. And God says in the Qur'an, and we have created everything in pairs of two, that haply you may remember the one. In conclusion, gender is among the first principles of this world, those self-evident principles that underlie our conception of the world as basic assumptions. It is as much a fact of life as our skin color, the flight of birds, or death. As such, it behooves us not to follow the execrable one. And God says in the Qur'an, and I swear to lead them astray, and fill them with disastrous empty hopes, and bid them crop the ears of livestock camels in consecration to idols, and command them to deform the creation of Allah. And whoso takes the devil as his strong protecting friend, short of Allah, has lost everything in clear, utter ruin. And rather order ourselves by use of the gift of God, the rational faculty, to become the noble reigning deputies he created us to be.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Bob, do you have any questions for Sean?
I guess one might show be the implementation of the punishments for adultery or fornication.
Mhm.
In the Old Testament, there are strong punishments for those things. In a civil society, it's not so easy. There was in America at one time, you could be punished quite severely for adultery.
Yep.
Nowadays, that would be laughed at, the very thought of it.
Yes.
So fulfilling that what you wrote there, how do you see that play out in modern society? In other words, you may have some in the Islamic world, travel a little bit in the Islamic world, you have some countries that are under more Sharia law and that would be able to complete that. You have others that are trying to maintain more of a secular law that would have the same constraints the West might have, as far as we can't get involved in those kinds of issues as far as punishment or judgment. I don't know if you have anything to add to that. Please.
Well, yeah, one, I would contend that none of the Muslim countries are following quote unquote Sharia law. Following Sharia law requires quite a bit more than what the countries are doing. Or particularly, I guess, it requires people knowledgeable of the Sharia law. And typically the implementation of it in Muslim countries is not done by those people. Historically, there were checks and balances set up in the governmental implementation, in that you had the government, you had the Sultan and people with him or the Khalifa, Caliph, or however you phrase it. But you also had the scholars as a class, and the scholars served as a check on executive authority. That no longer, unfortunately, exists to a large extent. So, like I said, I would question the implementation of Sharia law. Specifically, to what you asked about how I see it play out. First of all, there needs to be an implementation of Sharia law. Secondly, as I mentioned in the paper, there's a high bar for actually, there's a high bar in the Sharia for actually being able to implement the punishment. First of all, there has to be 4 witnesses that witness actual implementation. And like I said, it needs that would almost necessitate it being a public act. And then also the implementation of the punishment is first determined by a judge and then implemented by the Sultan. And we have no more sultans or caliphs anymore. The last of those being with the Ottoman Empire in 1924.
Right.
So implementing it currently in today's society or in today's context would require quite a bit of change.
How, could you tell me how, just as a side issue, I guess, but how strict was the Ottoman Empire before 1924?
With regard to
This issue or any other?
Well, historically, this issue, the punishment was not implemented a lot, mostly because of that high bar that you need of the 4 witnesses, and then the 4 witnesses seeing actual penetration. But also, I mean, well, yeah, that's the main reason for it not really being implemented. Mostly the times that it was implemented were when people came forth and admitted it. That they wanted to be punished in this world, because generally speaking, in Islam, it's seen to be better to be punished in this world rather than in the next world, where the punishment is seen as being more severe.
Right. So do you have any other questions?
Not right now. Oh,
Sean, do you have any questions for Bob?
I don't, unfortunately, because I didn't have the paper to read through, and for me, it's much easier to focus on things when I'm able to read. So I don't, unfortunately, at this time.
In your 3rd page, Sean, you mentioned that the punishment for homosexuality, and I think I'm trying to find the words right now, but I think you mentioned also
Fornication and adultery.
Fornication and adultery, but you didn't mention marriage. Now, very often this issue is phrased in terms of sex outside of marriage. Does that phraseology come up in Islam also?
Yeah, so fornication is seen as being, in Islam, it's seen as being intercourse between 2 people, neither of them being married. And then there's adultery, which is seen as being fornication between 2 people where at least one of them is married.
Okay.
I would say we have the same definition, right, Guy? I mean, I would say that same.
I believe it's the same, yeah.
Same, yeah.
But the punishment is different.
The punishment between the 2 is different, yeah. That's why I said it's either whipping or stoning to death. For fornication, the punishment is whipping, whereas stoning to death, or sorry, the punishment for adultery is the stoning to death.
So that's the same as the Torah.
Roughly, yeah. There are some caveats. So, for example, if the person, so there's for the stoning to death, there's a kind of a small pit that is dug, and it goes up to the waist of the person being punished. If at any time the person tries to escape from that, you have to stop stoning them.
Oh. There is a procedure in rabbinic law for exactly how that stoning takes place.
Yeah.
And certain people do it to begin with, And then, at one point, somebody, a different person in different cases, will bring a big rock and slam it against the head.
Mm.
I don't know why, we need those details, because of course in Christianity and Islam and Judaism, these things are not carried out anymore. Now, I have a question, another question.
Mhm.
I think we all assume, I mean, all believers assume that something's going to happen. The society, reality, the world is going to be different after Isa returned. And what will that be like? Are we going to be punished then? And is there going to be sin at that point? John?
Yeah. So once Jesus, peace be upon him, returns, then that is seen as a time of the proper implementation of a Sharia law. Muslims believe that he will fall under the banner of the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, and that he will, there will be a proper implementation of Sharia law. So punishment will be according to what's in the Sharia law.
What would you say happens after Jesus returned?
Well, my understanding, when Jesus returns, it's going to be a new heaven, a new earth. There won't be sin. There won't be those kinds of temptations. We'll be given new bodies that will not need to procreate, and therefore those kinds of things will no longer be necessary. Jesus said, one time that it is like children are given, how do I say, word it right, are being given marriage and given to marriage, but in the life to come, that's not going to be true any longer. I think we'll be so full of God's glory and having God reveal his glory to us, we're not going to miss it. There's so much more glory from God to give. I don't think we're going to miss the sexual act was for a time to procreate the earth and to give men and women pleasure for themselves, but it won't be necessary in the life to come.
So you mean there will be no sexuality then? In Christian understanding, after Jesus returns, then there will be no need to procreate and
Don't know.
and there will be no sexuality either.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's the way I understand it.
So, and the people
So
will
is
not
it-
die. Then if you don't procreate, then
Yeah.
the people will,
So those people living
population
on,
will decline then.
They will,
Right.
but they don't die, they'll live on.
yeah, they'll
no
be
death.
eternal.
Yeah, that understanding is more like coinciding with Islamic understanding after the Day of Judgment. When the judgment has been done and the righteous have been given the reward of paradise and the sinfuls have been given the reward, their recompense.
Yeah, we agree with you. That's when Jesus comes back and says
Then
that.
the death will be, God says the death will be brought and it will be killed. So nobody will die then. And it's basically after that. But in Islamic understanding, when Jesus returns on this world, that event will not happen after the Day of Judgment. The Day of Judgment has to come way after. So he will come and everything will be same, and the Sharia, Islamic Sharia will be implemented. There will be no one who does not believe in Islam, and to the point that he will abolish the tax called jizya, which is to be taken from the non-Muslims because there will be no non-Muslims. So that's the understanding. But people will still die. They will die naturally, and in all other ways.
Yeah, well, we probably have a disagreement, but I don't want to get too, let John address it, but I don't want to, I don't hear topics of eschatology today.
That's a significant difference in the understanding of what Jesus' return means. In Christianity,
Sean has a question.
he returns as the judge. So
He returns as judge, not as kind of a temporary person who temporarily. So, you know.
Sean?
Yeah, I had a
So Sean,
question.
did you want to say something more?
I just had a question for Bob. So is Jesus' coming seen as being after the resurrection?
Jesus coming after the resurrection? No, you can't. I don't think you divide those into after, before. Jesus, when Jesus comes back, he's resurrected from the dead now, right? When he comes back in, we call that the second coming. That's when he comes to judge the world and implements his judgment into where people are going to spend their eternal. Their eternal destination would determine at that point.
You mentioned the difference in the bodies that we will have. So in Islamic understanding, at least, that's would be after the resurrection.
That's people of us.
Yeah.
Well, most Christians, I think, probably, I can say it that way, believe that when Jesus returns, then we'll have the resurrection and the judgment, and that's the end. The Catholic Church officially believes that. I think the Orthodox and the Anglicans do too. And
No, I think that's
think
standard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's standard. I mean, I think we all agree with that.
Lutherans believe that. I don't think there are very many people that don't look at it that way. So there is no interim. Now in Islam, there clearly is a day or two or part of a day when you are in heaven, I guess it is, and sometimes you'll be a green bird, according to the Sahih Hadith. And there really isn't a lot of information, and then there will be the judgment, right? So I don't know how that fits in with what happens after Jesus returns. How do you put that?
Well, with his coming, there's a period of peace that will ensue, and then there will be a period of corruption, briefly speaking, and then the resurrection will proceed after that. Yeah.
I think we're kind of getting off our.
Yeah,
we're
we are.
getting into eschatology.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
to-
sorry.
I was trying to make the point that
I'm glad to do eschatology sometime, but let's our topic isn't eschatology today.
I was trying to make the point that sexuality is for this world. It may be for some other cases too, but it was created before this world was created.
I would like to get these three gentlemen here. They're all doing their PhDs and they're friends of mine. I'd like to get them to make sure they have a chance to talk. I want to ask one question while they're thinking about any questions they might have. Would be, I mentioned at the very end of my paper about the idea of the relationship between Christ and the individual believer described in somewhat sexual terms because it's so intimate. Our walk with God can be so intimate that the only way they can describe it is that I've read a little bit of that in Sufi, but not all Muslims accept Sufism. How widespread do you think is the area of this kind of relationship with Allah possible? Maybe outside of some Sufi sources. I'd be curious to ask my Muslim friends that.
Do you have any comments on that?
You were trying to say the relationship is with God will be more like a relationship that is developed through sex.
No, not developed through sex. It's using sexual imagery because it's so intimate. Let me give an example. For example, in Song of Songs, there's an example where the husband, the lover wants to knock on his bride's door and say, "Please let me in." And she's, "Oh, I'm laying down now. I washed my feet. I don't want to get up." So he leaves. And then she later says, "Oh, why did I do that?" She feels terrible. So she's trying to find him. Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? And she can't find him. She's so frantic. He wanted to see me. I didn't want him. And so what's the parallel you draw there? God wants to speak to us and draw us to himself. But I'm busy now. I don't have time for God right now. And we do the same thing. So we're talking about, it's using a male-female relationship with its good, bad, to describe how the believer and God sometimes, how we interact with God. It's using it, so it's a very intimate terms it's used. It's not just we know Jesus as God is our master and we bow before him, or he's our father. Even father is a wonderful relationship. But how about the bridegroom and the bride relationship is very, very intimate relationship between God and his bride as possible. And I think that's kind of like what this last quote I had, where she says is that, are we perhaps skilled in our theology of upholding a Savior who gives his whole life for us? We all believe that Jesus, I mean, I'm saying we as Christians, gave his life for us. He was sacrificed for us, but not seeing him as the groom who desires and delights in us. In the song, we not only see his desire, but his desire arouses our own. And we long for the day when we will consummate that desire. We long for him because he first longed for us. So I mean, it's talking about a relationship of spending time with God, not because it's required, but because you want to be in his presence. You want to be adoring him and just drawing upon that relationship. Does that make sense at all? I don't know how much I've heard. There's a little bit of this in Sufism, but I've not heard it in how much it is in mainstream, if I use that word, mainstream Islam.
Yeah,
So
there's
what are Muslims
quite a
about
bit of it in Sufi poetry.
Right, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Rumi is a good example. And yeah. For me, I mean, Sufism is part and parcel of mainstream Islam. Traditionally, that's been the view. There, of course, are extreme views within Sufism, as there are extreme views in the juridical aspect of Islam, or extreme views in everything. You know, we are human beings, and we tend to take on extreme views. So in mainstream Islam, you know, Sufism has been always part and parcel of that. I don't know of anything in the primary textual sources, being the Qur'an and the Hadith, that speaks to this particularly. The closest thing I can think of is the verse that I quoted in my paper, and we have created everything in pairs of two, that happily you may remember the one. So one of the inferences you can take from that is, by seeing the relationship of the two, you know, husband and wife, or the love that they have for each other, can be an indication of the love that God has for us. It's also, there are also, you know, similar things with regard to the mother and her child, as a demonstration of the love God has for us. A lot of it comes up later in poetry and things like that, and they're used analogously.
So, so it's more like I think metaphorical and ways, giving analogies. I think Sufism also has used various
Yeah, they do.
metaphors and created these use these analogies to basically make the human understand or get close to understanding of what actually God, the love of God, is actually. So, but there is nothing in the world that can actually really describe. But I think the closest things are those loves.
Yeah, I think
So, there's a hadith of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. In Islam, the criteria of prostrating your head in front of someone is considered as that you're taking that person as your God. And if you prostrate this to someone else, that means you're doing shirk. And in one of the hadiths, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, if there is a permission to prostrate to somebody else from God, if there was any permission, then I would have allowed the woman to prostrate to her husband. So maybe that's something you can relate with this, but I think that what you see from the Sufism, they're more like extrapolating things to also making the people understand the basic idea of Islam. There are ways of marketing, you can say. There are ways of marketing. Everybody has different ways of bringing people to Islam. And Sufis have brought a lot of Muslims to people to Islam, especially in subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. The major Islamic population you find there, they are basically thankful to their efforts. Their efforts were like this.
Good point. Good one.
Yeah, the same is true in West Africa. in Senegal, for example. Most of the Muslims are in the Sufi brotherhoods.
Yeah, that's true. Some places, almost all, yeah. Can I get one of you three guys? I promise you guys they have a chance to talk, but I want to give these guys a chance because they came with me today. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so I want to say two things. One is about sexuality. So my understanding is that sexuality does not end in this world because Prophet said the righteous wife and the righteous husband will be reunited in the heaven. So and they will be husband and wife. My understanding. So and about Buddhism ideology of God love. So they got it from the prophet saying that God said, if you crawl toward me, I will walk toward you. If you walk toward me, I will run toward you. And if you run toward me, I'll fly toward you. So you see, interpretation of God, God's love to humans. So meaning that the more devoted you are to God, the more God gives you attention and love. Yeah.
Is Sufism quite strong in among Yoruba and Nigeria?
Initially, just like many other West African countries, Sufism was the main Islamic sect, but many of contemporary scholars are now Sunni. So Sufism is now at the very low because people are now realizing what is Sunnah and Hadith.
Yeah.
So and they tend to leave the those doctrine that does not really represent Hadith and Quran.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's correct.
How about Cesar or Zaki? Do you think is what to say?
Yeah, so I was not very much like relating with the things that was being said about Sufism, as like as you mentioned that the relationship between God and those who have submitted to Him in intimate terms. So like for us, what I know is Allah is like above humans. So humans can have intimate relationship and like they can sin, but not Allah or God. So there is a boundary. So I like whatever was being discussed about Sufism, I was not like very yeah. I couldn't agree with that, and yeah, but I don't have any question regarding anything. So, I think very different topics were being discussed from Christian point of view and Islamic point of view. And in Christian point of view, we were discussing about intimate relationship, sexual relationship, but in Islamic point of view, we were discussing about like mostly gender and like recently what we are seeing as like having multiple genders, the problem of homosexuality. So yeah, if I don't have a question as of now, but it's nice.
I think there's one thing that I'll see if Cesar has anything wants to add to this. I think whatever we attribute to, whether it's globalization, urbanization, both I think the Islamic world and the Christian world are facing a sexual crisis. It's not, there was a time when two people came together, they were both expected to be virgins and they got married young and they stayed together for life. I mean, at least that was the ideal. It's that ideal is getting weaker and weaker across the world. And it's still there. The Bible and the Quran haven't changed on the topic, but how much it affects the culture. I've seen statistics in Turkey, which is a 99% Muslim country, and they're about the same as the West as far as sex outside of marriage. There's very little difference, according to the statistics anyway. It's not like it's everybody's a virgin in Turkey when they get married. It's changing rapidly.
Turkey is closer to West.
Yeah, well, I know. I agree.
Geographically.
I agree.
It's more-
I agree.
More influence.
I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that. But I think you're seeing it spread beyond Turkey.
It's spreading, actually, it's spreading more. We
And I
are
think that's-
seeing changes in our back home in our countries too, things slowly. Especially the media, the openness, if you compare the world before there was TV and after there was TV,
Oh, yeah.
you will see this gender issues started.
Oh, yeah, no question.
It's because it's a marketing thirst of the people who sell products on these channels.
Yeah, no
They
question.
want things to be this way.
That's definitely true. So, did you want to add?
Oh, yeah, I do have some thoughts that are running through my mind, but let me start by, I think, saying thank you for this, making this happen. I think it's a sign that we are both, like, Muslim or Christian, we are committed to have a peaceful world. I think, we can agree that this ideal is Bob shared, and it's the idea of like the true context of real and actual sexuality. But as in the reality, there's a lot of like gray areas and different dynamics. So getting together and discussing what could be done, I think it's powerful move. And we should be kind of thankful for that first. Second, I want to comment on also the presenting the love of God or the pursuit of God as sort of a bride and the bridegroom. I think it's a common theme in like Christianity. And then not only for like church and God, but also I think Catholics, we use that as like also for wisdom, like as you pursue wisdom, as you are curious to know something, investigate, it reveals itself to you and kind of you become harmony, you meet in the middle, you learn more about it, it kind of consumes you because it starts to take up your interest. And in some way that you can't even explain it, but you become more engrossed and interested in that in a way. I think that's kind of one way to represent the maybe the eros part of love between God and church or God and human being. Because you're trying to consume each other. But I would say it's not as common as agape, which is the major one that's in the aspect of sacrificial love that Jesus showed when he died for us. So I have a few questions. I think mostly for like a Muslim because I'm mostly familiar with the Christianity and try to ask these questions in a Christian perspective. I think I have some understanding in terms of Christianity, but for Muslims, I had a question about adultery. I think initially agreed that we both like understand it to be having sexual intercourse with someone who's married and someone who's not married. But I think Jesus commented on that, even having lust or looking at a person of different sex with the lust, you already committed adultery. So that's kind of more of a not like negating what was in Torah or in Muslim, but like it took a different shape. So I want to comment on that and ask a question that is more relevant to our culture today, with the pornography, with this image saturation. We're seeing a new dynamics of like this lustful image. And I wonder like what is the Muslim perspective on what is the line between what's adulterous and what's not? Because it's very common. I just want to know if are we defining adultery? Are we putting some limits to what not to do, or are we being allowing because it's not clearly having sexual intercourse? So that's kind of first question. And then I have probably two more.
You want a Muslim response, all right?
Yeah.
Sean, will you let us?
Sorry, I didn't catch the question entirely. Was you were asking about the line between adultery and something else, or?
Yeah, Jesus redefined that even looking at someone of opposite gender with lust, you already committed adultery. And it's more of an extension of definition of adultery. And I wonder, like, with the saturation of lustful image and like pornography and different dynamics, like, what is your perspective on where we should limit? Like, where's the limit? And are we redefining adultery? Like, how do you kind of understand that?
Okay. Yeah, classically, the limit is, adultery is defined as intercourse between two people, one of which is married, or both of them could be married. That's the classical definition. There are, and that particular act is subject to the punishment I mentioned earlier. There are indications, I believe in hadith, but definitely by the scholars, that there's an adultery of the eyes, for example, or a fornication of the eyes, fornication of the tongue, so on and so forth. So there is also an extension like that. They're analogically compared to adultery, but they're not subject to the same punishment. And for also in addition to that, there's a general rule that anything well, actually, let me take that back. There's thing so the fornication of the eyes is watching things such as adultery. So if someone is committing adultery, then that would be considered like a fornication of the eyes, but it's not subject to the same punishment. It's considered to be something that is forbidden to do, but it would be it's left up to God to punish that as he sees fit. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I think.
I think this wasn't John. Do you mean watching something on TV or internet would be watching adultery take place on that, or are you talking about in person watching it?
Either one.
Okay, all right, this one.
Yeah, I mean,
I have a question. I just want to tell you about that, what Sean said, piggyback on it. This is all I know is, it is a lust that, that lead to adultery. So it should be avoided in Islam.
Yeah, can I just add one saying of the Prophet, peace be upon him, regarding this idea is the same as you mentioned from the Christian perspective, and basically Sean also confirmed it from Islamic perspective, same. And there is a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ says that the first glance is okay, the second glance is sinful.
Yeah,
Drop your eyes.
Yeah, drop your eyes, because the first glance is accident. You accidentally saw someone which you are not supposed to see. And then the second time when you see, that is your intention, and that will be something for you to be held responsible.
I think the Quran.
That's the criteria.
The Quran certainly would, that part of the Quran would certainly reference pornography or movies. But it also seems to me that if you're just in the mall and you see a beautiful woman, you need to drop your eye.
Yeah.
Even if she's completely covered.
Yeah.
You might think, wow, that's a girl. You shouldn't focus on that.
it's.
Sorry, John he's been hit.
Lower the gaze. The word is lower the gaze. In Islam, lower the gaze.
It's
Lower
called
your
in Arabic غض النظر, means lowering the gaze.
Oh, we would see in English, drop our eyes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
about the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah, with
John.
respect to what you were saying, Jesus didn't redefine adultery. He said that if you look at a woman with lust, you're committing adultery in your heart. So it's It's
Right.
it's an interior sin as opposed to a public physical sin. So it would be something that I think Sean already mentioned. Nobody else knows, you know, only God knows that wrong has taken place. So it doesn't redefine adultery. It just, where is the adultery happening? Is it inside or outside?
That makes sense.
The implication is that there's a punishment, but it's also a test. And in every test, there is learning. If, at least if we're believers and we are trying to learn, then we can learn from that. The next time, maybe we will lower our gauge.
There's something interesting that Zaki was part of this, but the Muslim Student Association of the University of Minnesota had a fast-a-thon, and they encouraged non-Muslims to fast Ramadan, not just food. A lot of us have fasted food for a long time, but not water. So some of us fasted water as well as food, and they asked us to share our experiences at the Muslim, right? Zach, you remember that? Well, one of the Muslim students said, and I said, well, sometimes Christians will now fast from media or from other things, not just food. That could be more challenging for this generation to fast from social media than it is to fast from food. And one of the Muslim students said, yeah, we're wrestling with that too. If we're scrolling through our phones and there's a beautiful woman there, how long does it take you to keep scrolling? And so we were struggling with the same issue. Do you remember that, Zaki? Yeah, because we were part of that. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or anything you want to say?
Yeah, but looking at it, the first look is yours.
Yeah, I understand that.
The second is against you. So you saw a beautiful woman. Okay, I'm not gonna look at it. I continue. But if you start saying that's not right to keep looking at her like I'm doing right now.
But if someone's fasting from food, brother, if someone's fasting from food, but to fill their time until Ramadan, until iftar, they're watching all kinds of stuff on TV.
Yeah.
Is that real fasting? You know, you see what I'm saying? Is that
Yeah.
if you're watching junk on TV, if you're watching trashy stuff on, or, you know, not necessarily on TV to make the time go faster till iftar, is that a violation of Ramadan as well as it would be?
I think we face that when we watch soccer games or movies. I mean, nothing indecent or anything like that. That is, some people look at it that you are trying to speed up Ramadan, the day, so you can really eat at the end. God only knows what's in our heart, and He is going to deal with us accordingly. Are we doing this because we would like the time to pass, or we're doing this because we'd like to watch the game? But at the same time, did we miss the prayers while watching the game? That it's all whole package to be done, and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who's going to judge us. But I'd like to add something here to sexuality. In Islam, sex is good.
Yeah.
It's not a sin. To think of sex is not a sin. To act accordingly with your wife, husband and wife, that's God will reward you for that. But to do it with a person who is not your wife, that becomes fornication or adultery. But sex is good. At the same time, God in the Qur'an keep reminding us in two stories. One of them, Lot, the people of Lot, when he said, why are you doing this? Here my daughters, take them and marry them. He said, we don't want your daughter. We want the guys, the men whom you are having right now. So it's Quran came to say LGBTQ, unfortunately, is wrong to Islam. Period. The second one, we also discovered in the stories
the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, when the woman he was living at her place tried to have a relationship with him. That is the first time when I was young to find out, oh, the Quran talks about the relationship between a married woman and a slave boy. And he avoided to touch her, and he tried to run, and she grabbed him from his shirt and stuff. We all know the story. But that is to tell you that sex between people who are not married to one another is wrong, and it's punishable by whipping or death. There is an old story during the time of the Abbasids, that some people came to the judge. No, in Islam there is nothing called I take the law in my own hand. You have to go to the judge. Some people brought a man, a woman to the judge, and they said, we found them doing adultery together. So they asked the first one, did you see them? He said, yes, I saw them like a pin in a cup. The second one, he said, yes, I saw the same. The third one said, yes, same. The fourth one, he said, what did you see? He said, I saw a man and a woman not dressed and crying and screaming. So he told him, you didn't see a man in a cup? He said, no, I didn't. So the question, the answer, so the judge came back to the other three. What happened? He said, we were walking and we heard noise. We went in the empty place, vacant place, and we saw that act. But we were three, but we needed the fourth one. So by the time we went and found some guy walking in the street, was come and have a look. They disengaged from one another. The judge said, the four of you, 80 lashes.
Yeah.
Because they accused the man and the woman in their chastity.
Yeah.
So the laws are there for Sharia law. And in Egypt, in 1928, the French Penal Code was introduced in Egypt. So there is no Sharia law applied in this issue. If a woman found she's adulterous and proof, but the proof is not full.
Yeah.
Just her husband is enough. She takes 2 years in prison. Although in Islam, according to the Quran, this is Quran. If a husband goes in and finds his wife with beating somebody, if he goes out to check it out and they come back and nothing will be shown. So a man did that, and he stood up in the marketplace and he said, I saw my wife with that guy. He was arrested and brought to the Messenger Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. So at that time, he asked him to give 4 oaths that he saw this being done. And he gave it. At that time, she was given the chance to give 4 oaths to counter his oath. The 5th one, he said, I give my 5th one on God's curse on the liar. She did the same. And accordingly, Messenger Muhammad ﷺ separated them from one another. She was not punished, and he was not punished. But she separated from one another. This is Quran.
Yeah.
So these things are very well defined in Islam about what to do and what not to do. Like, for example, 2 men together, it's written in the Quran, annoy them or hurt them, but it doesn't say anything more than that.
Doesn't it say 80 lashes?
It says hurt them.
Oh.
فآذوهما. Just hurt them. It didn't say kill them. It said hurt them. So it's very identified to us, and also just to show you how good that sex is good, that during Ramadan, you are not allowed during sunrise to sunset, you're not allowed to eat, drink, and have marital relationship.
Right.
But marital relationship is allowed after sunset.
Yeah.
So there is nothing wrong. And also in the relationship, it can be done whenever you like, except one act that is forbidden. And if it is done, the wife has a right to get divorced from that person. That's what I understood.
So, Henry,
Yeah, had a question for you because both presenters seem to assume or say that God created sex, male and female, and that is a given. But there are a number of people today who are saying, well, we don't have this bipolar male-female anymore, but we have a continuum, and that there can be any number of sexualities that we can find along that continuum. And there have been some who, in the Christian camp at least, who would say, well, that's because of the fall, that, you know, initially there were male and female, but after the fall, there's a brokenness that enters in, and that's why you may find transgender or LGBTQ, things like that. I'm wondering if both of you could comment on that. Did God create a continuum of sexuality, or is that only because of the fall? How would you address that today?
Bob, I don't know if Sean was going first, or I'm going first.
Go ahead if you want.
First, yeah, that's a tricky one, obviously. I would just summarize like this very, very briefly. The fact there's a trend toward it now that makes me suspicious that you know, that you can say, well, God did this, or God created him this way, because it's become it's become somewhat trendy. Are there people then that may have an inclination or have some kind of genetic disorder that makes them more inclined one way or the other, more than what their natural gender differentiation would make? I think that's possible, and that's where I think mercy comes in. I don't know, it's a tricky issue, and I certainly don't claim to be an expert on this area, so I don't know how much I want to say on it. Just simply because I think it's a very, 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 very small percentage of people that we're talking about here that really have gender dysphoria, outside the fact that it's become something that people kind of gotten on board with, but not because it's necessarily something that God created them in a way that makes them unique. I think it's more likely to be attributed to the way they're raised, you know, and there's a lot more that can be said on this here that may give them an inclination one way or the other, or why a person be encouraged more toward homosexuality, or a person be encouraged toward wanting to change their gender or be dissatisfied with their gender. I'm going to leave it at that for right now, because I'm not an expert on it, and I think it's just, like I said, I think it's gotten trendy. Not really. I'm just leery about how much of it's real. You know, as a defect that we can point to God and say, you know, God did that. I don't know. Anybody else want to add anything from a Christian perspective before Sean addresses it? Either John or Al, or anybody else here want to? Yeah, John, go.
I think, as I understand it, basically, it goes back to a doubt about creation. I mean, if our whole culture, you know, apart from religion, doesn't believe in creation. I mean, everything is a product of evolution, and as the Apostle Paul wrote in Romans, we have a culture that worships and serves the creature rather than the creator, and
Yeah.
there's an antipathy against anything that is supposedly given that is not chosen by me. I mean, I don't want to be bound by anything that I myself have not chosen. I mean, my autonomy is kind of the absolute ideal. So to even tell me that my body tells me if I'm a male or a female, well, if I don't like that, I don't agree, you know. So I mean, it goes back to that basic doctrine of creation that God created human beings, male or female. Now, I mean, there could be genetic problems along the line, as we well know, but I think our culture basically resists that whole idea that I have some identity that has been given to me by somebody outside of myself. And that's just rampant throughout our culture nowadays.
Sean, you have a comment?
Yeah, I think he touched on at the end, whoever was commenting there, on my opinion. I think this is a conflation of biology and identity. In Islam, as according to the verses that I gave from the Qur'an, biologically speaking, there are two genders, male and female. There's no continuum there. You're either a male or a female. And that, you know, that's obviously discounting the exceptions that occur because exceptions obviously occur, but there's always the general rule that applies. So biologically speaking, there is no continuum. But the question and the issue, like I said, to my thinking, arises from a conflation of identity and the biology of gender. And the whole issue of the identity of gender is a very recent phenomenon that's only maybe a few decades old.
Hafiz?
Can I make some comments on it? Looking at the sexuality, I mean, let's say that, I don't have much knowledge, trust me, I don't have much knowledge about these letters, LGBTQ, B, C, D, Y, and I don't even can describe and where they're coming from, but the understanding that I have from Quran and Sunnah, I will talk from that perspective. And we must remember one thing, that Quran and Islam teaches us that everybody is born in this world for a test. And everybody will be given a test. Remember, I talked to you, I have a test too. So similarly, everybody has but each person will not have same test. Every person will have a different test. Let's talk about if you pick all the heterosexual people. Will all like to have same amount of sex? No. Somebody is too exaggerative, overactive, and somebody is very calm. What is that then? It's because that everybody is given a test. Now something that is a tendency of someone to commit, as like someone is has a tendency of stealing things. He loves to steal things, but it is a sin, right? And someone becomes a serial killer. He has a tendency, he doesn't feel bad if someone cuts open somewhere. by his hands. He has a tendency. But the Quran and Islam teaches us when you fight against your tendency, when you fight against the tendency against that is given to you, your test, and you come back towards what Allah has prescribed for you, and you follow that by fighting that tendency, then your reward is based on how much did you fight. Someone has this amount of heterosexual love, and he's opposing himself about this much effort, then Allah says that you will get this much reward. If someone has a little tendency to do the heterosexuality and he is fighting this much, and he will have this much reward. And the rewards in the paradise are explained a lot in Quran. Someone will get this much, someone will get this much, depends on how much effort did you put in your. Now, where do you want to put the effort? It's the test. Everybody is given their separate tests. And if you're fighting your test with better effort, then that's what Allah has placed something for you already. He wanted you to get there. He has a reward for you, that's why. If he's putting you in difficulties in this world, let's say someone is very sick. I always quote example of my wife. She got disabled, and she has a tendency to say there is no God. He doesn't care about me, right? Everybody walks on the land, but I can't. But if she fights this and she turns towards God more, then it's her fight. She is fighting, and for this she will get more reward. And more you fight, and those tests which Allah put you in, it's because He had something in there for you. He wants you to get it. Now, coming back to if someone has a tendency to be an L, and someone has a tendency to be a G, someone has a tendency to be a Q or whatever, it is their test that Allah is giving in them. And Islam is not denying that these are not, but it is their test that you fight against them, that they should fight against it and then come back towards what Allah has created you for. And the more they fight against it, the more reward is kept for them. So it is the test. Basically, everybody is getting their test.
This is what we call Messenger Muhammad ﷺ said, jihad al-nafs.
Jihad al-nafs.
Struggle against your inner thinking. Inner thinking. I love this guy and I don't like that guy. I want to hurt that guy. I want to punch that guy.
Or I want to become a girl.
I want to become a
girl.
Can you
It can be anything. And you have to control yourself.
This is your test that Allah is giving you.
And nobody gets tempted.
When we say the same thing, and we would use quite the same language, we'd say redemption, that God can take that and bring redemption into it. I've heard the stories of many people that were homosexually inclined, or even had, there's even a few cases of people that actually had the sex change and have now become believers in Christ, and they can't undo everything, but they no longer practice that deviant form. So I think when they say you're fighting it, I think Christians would say God brings redemption into it. But I mean, we're talking about the same thing. There has to be a stop and say, I repent, I change, and then walk toward redemption. You're really quiet, Adam. If you want to say it, we haven't given him a chance to say much.
And
today.
also the new gentleman.
Yeah, the new gentleman too, as well. We should get you guys.
Yeah, I was gonna call on Steve next. How about that, Steve?
I just came into this, so I don't, about 20 minutes ago, so I'm just listening here.
Okay, Adam.
I guess, does the Quran talk about anything specifically with, transgendered or not identifying as male or female or trying to switch? I'm assuming no, because it's a fairly new concept, I think, here within Christianity as well, or within culture in general, even though they're kind of try to tie some historical stuff to it. Which, yeah, as we said, I'm sure it occurred like in some rare scenarios before, but I'm assuming there's nothing specific about that.
Nothing specific, but if you look at the verse that I quoted, I think close to the or at the end or very close to the end of my paper, it talks about change the devil trying to get us to change the creation of Allah. So that's probably the verse that speaks most directly to it.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess to my perspective, I mean, a lot of people don't feel feminine or masculine. I guess if you want to be kind of neutral, I don't see any biblical argument against that. But yeah, if you're trying to make physical changes, that would fall under like self-harm. So physical self-harm, which I would think would be about the same as harming someone else from a biblical code.
I just want to say that I agree completely with Hafiz in his characterization of this as a test. God tests us every day, all day long, and each one of us, as he said, has got a different test. In the Talmud, there's a lot of discussion of what should be done with people that have no sexual organs. They're tum-tums, I think they call them in the Talmud, or androgynous, which are both of the organs. But you know, these are just different people with different tests. And God, in the Lord's Prayer, it says, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Now, in Greek, Luke 11:1 and following it, the word temptation is, I'm sorry, it's later than that. Put us, wait now, just a minute. When it says, put us not to the test, but deliver us, and that's the wording in the King James Version. Let us not be, what did I say before? Lead us not into temptation. The Greek word means test, but test, in God's way of looking at things, he does not give us a test unless he's guiding us. In fact, he's always guiding us. So it's really a learning experience. And every time something comes to us, an idea, even if it's a person, it's the idea that's the main thing. And God says, yes, no, maybe. He helps us through every one of those. And our tendency in some cases is to say, no, I don't like doing the good thing. I'm going to do the bad thing again. But if we're believers, we're likely, whether we're Christians or Muslims or whatever, we're likely to go toward the side of doing the good that God tells us to do. And then the next time it happens, it's easier. We get better and better. And that's the learning experience, which is implicit in the test. I just want to say that we, in our discussions of sexuality today, 95% of it has been about learning not to do the wrong thing. Well, as Saudi said, sex in God's view is a gift. It's something that he wants us to have. And that's a learning experience too. More than any other person, more than any other challenge that we have, more than any other thing that happens to us, is our relationship with our wife. Now, we can make mistakes, and we probably make more mistakes with our wife talking and whatever we do than with anybody else, because we know them better. We're with them all the time. It's our greatest test. And sexuality brings us together. It's meant to, at least, bring us together and make the test easier. And God made us that way. have to be concerned about avoiding the bad side of sex, but we have to emphasize a little bit more the good side of sex. The rabbis wrote the Talmud said, every week or more often, you have to have sex. It's a requirement. Men have to do it. I'm not sure that you can pin it down that well, but both partners have to understand that they have an obligation to their partner to engage in sex from time to time because it's a good thing.
Within marriage, of course.
The problem today is that this idea of test is not accepted. It's not a test, it's a green light.
Yeah.
And the rest of you have nothing to say except to agree, you know,
Yeah.
and that's even working itself into law, which is very distressing.
Yeah, I just have to say, since you mentioned law, I heard a report a month ago on the radio. I don't know much about it, just a comment I heard on the radio. This famous historian at Harvard, no less, is studying the downfall of the great civilizations. And he looked at a lot of things and discovered that the disintegration of marriage was the thing, and that in terms of the timing, that caused the downfall of Rome, all the ancient stuff. And that's a sexuality thing, you know. That's what's happening to us.
Yeah.
Europe is ahead of us on that, and they are more secular than we are in general, and they're more unstable than we are. But we are going down that path really fast. And I don't think that's, I don't think this historical trend is something that we should not talk about today.
Like that's Carly Zimmerman. I read his book and he talks about 10 factors that show a declining culture, the decline of the family, juvenile delinquency, heroes debunked, you know, national heroes are debunked, you know.
Yeah.
And a number of other things like that. And this was in 47 when he wrote this, when America was still pretty relatively strong in the family. He came back now with what he say.
Yeah.
But he saw it already happen. He traced through every, you know, almost every civilization and found that pattern, you know, from ancient, even before Rome and Mesopotamia, all the way up to current. And they usually last about 200 years or a little over 200 years. And, you know, America's at, what are we at, about 270 now? So, you know, and I think we can say we're in decline, no question. We're in decline.
What can we do? I mean,
you know, that's what I think we should spend the last 10 minutes talking about is we have the same common problem, Muslims and Christians in this area. Some areas we disagree with the Trinity, we talk about that, we argue about the cross. Okay, that's a debate, but this is not a debate. We got problems here.
We share the same problem.
We share the same problem. So what can we do about it? What can in the younger people here among us, and what can we do about it? I'd like to hear from them too. You know,
in one sense, we really know the solution. Muslims and Christians know the solution. Follow God, follow the scripture.
Yeah.
But the problem is really, how do we get this culture to do that? How do we get our kids to do that?
Well, I think what Bob, you had some quote in here about like, yeah, nobody likes hookup culture, but
yeah,
like, I know people who are like, oh, you know, I go out to, you know, women, I go out to places, you know, men only want sex, and you know, I go to the club and I can't meet normal men.
Yeah.
It's like, well, but it's also at the club. It's like
you went to the club.
Like people want they want to have their own rules, but then they also don't really like what that leads to.
Yeah, I think you said well there.
So I guess
that's what she said. Donna Frieda, she said that they don't like it, but they feel like they're trapped in it. They don't know how to do anything else. It's just what it is. So how do you challenge? Yeah, I think what you said.
How do you convince people that the direction society has them facing leads to a spot that they don't want to be? Which I think most people, if you really, you know, talk with them a few minutes, they realize that they just have that feeling of kind of powerlessness. This is how it goes. This is what you do.
Does anybody have a solution? Well, there are two two sides to the. approach.
He's got, he had something to say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, when you want to change something, you don't wanna remove it and leave a blank space. You
Right,
really
good
provide
point.
a strong alternative.
Mhm.
I think I find that much more appealing. If you're saying quit on watching images or doing this, then what to do? Like, can we bring some alternative? So for me, I think that what has been helpful is to surround myself with a group of, similar-minded, God-oriented, dedicated people around me. Bob has been helpful in that endeavor. I have different people at church of my age who have young adult groups. Anytime I go once or twice a week, I'm rekindled, I'm inspired again to get back on track.
Do your young people at your church, do they, I go to church, but I'm not young, so. Do they talk a lot about sexual purity? How do we maintain it? How can we keep each other accountable? Do you hear that a lot at St. Lawrence?
I think they're trying to bring that up. It's uncomfortable at first, but they're coming up with the ideas. We have this prayer meeting where we meet and be like kind of vulnerable, like, what are you struggling with? Your age, I know these years you must have lost, like, how are you handling it? And we are vulnerable and like, oh, I've been there and here's some solution. You can have, you can block these websites, these are like practical steps you can take. Has been helpful in that endeavor because of that type of influence. It's pouring in me. So I think that's one of the alternatives that people can.
It seems to me there are two avenues, and I don't want to talk too long, but there are two avenues. One is to evangelize, dawah more. If we go into the places where the people are that are causing these problems, not just sex, but there's all kinds of things going on in every kind of every area of the biblical teaching. People are doing the opposite. So if we get more believers, we're going to be better. Okay. Second thing is, what can the government do? Are there some things that we can encourage the lawmakers to put into law that would be helpful?
Is there anything among the young, I would be curious to ask, you're talking about the young Christians that, we were in the same church at St. Lawrence, but what about it in the Muslims? Do you guys ever talk about stuff like how to keep each other accountable? Do you guys, Zeki, your friends, do you ever talk about some of these issues, or you? Or?
Yeah, for me, like in my culture, like I'm Muslim. So I remember when I was young, I was in elementary school. Like my family, the way they taught me, like as Muslim. So like if you cannot look like the girl, like you look the face like 2 months. So there's this harm. When I was in the school, I sit next to like the girl. So my friends, they try to, oh, this is your girlfriend. Look, her face. I said, no, I'm not gonna look. So because my family taught me in the Islam, it's haram. So sometimes it's not good. So look, I avoided that, I grew up that idea. So sometimes like it's like what he said. It can be like most things like family from the family. So if the way you teach your the children, the way they grow, so they have that idea. Oh, that my family taught me this. I cannot look at the woman. I cannot look at her face of a girl. Look at her 2 months. That's not when I have that idea. When I grow, so if I share, it's me. But my family already taught me what is good, what's not good. And there's other things like we said, what the government, like idea, it doesn't have to be 100%. And if you have like more believer, so the thing can change. But if you have a more non-believer, it's gonna be like, kind of that. That's what I experienced when I was the way I grew. Yeah, I grew that idea. I don't have like.
In other words, it's the cradle. When the person is at the cradle, that's when it starts.
That's where it starts. Yeah.
If we can handle it there, then it can be handled.
It's really solved and made it easy when you are part of the community. But you cannot be alone and say, I'm gonna challenge this, challenge this. You can't. you need the community.
Yeah.
They say it needs a village to raise a person.
Mm.
So you need the community to work together in order to solve this problem.
Good point.
I agree with his point. Like, I think constraint is more important than like living your life. So if you follow both, just like we follow Quran and Christians follow Bible, so there needs to have a constraint as to how you live your life, and of course, you need to have like your parents or your family members telling as to what is right and what is wrong. And when people do mistakes, there should be like it's common to do mistakes and have feelings of like lust or other things, but inside like you should feel that it's not right, and there should be a like feeling of repentance. So I think that's what's is most important. And like when we were talking about solutions, I was thinking so maybe uh, like like I know I can only like assume that people in early like in olden times they used to get married earlier, and maybe with that they didn't have time to like why this gender fluidity and like heterosexuality is becoming popular now is what I feel is because of boredom. So they're trying to find avenues as to like what they could do, and this was not possible in like earlier time. That's what I feel. I can only assume. Cannot say with surety, but yeah, the point being there needs to have constraint on yourself, which happens when you follow a book or a religion, and like as you mentioned, like if your family values are better. So,
Good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, it's 4 o'clock. And we could continue, but we never do. There is another subject for today, and that is what are we going to talk about next year? If any of you want to stick around for about 10 minutes and talk about that, I'd appreciate it. How does that sound? Can you do that?
I'm sorry, I do have to leave.
Okay, do you have any topics you want to throw at it?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, okay.
There's some pressure.
I mean, I think it would be interesting to follow up on some of the things we've just been talking about now, but how can concerned Muslims and Christians cooperate fruitfully on some of these public issues?
I was thinking the same, yeah, that would be.
I mean, I think that, for example, I really appreciated seeing on TV some months ago. I know it was a Muslim guy at some school board meeting out in Osseo or wherever. He was standing up and saying, this stuff is against our religion. And we
Yeah,
don't
I appreciate it.
That's, you know,
Yeah.
that probably should happen more and more.
Yeah, I don't know how we would phrase that, but I think we all understand what it means.
But thank you all. I mean,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, if we're short on time, we could just choose a topic for September and do some discussion about future topics in September. But if we come up with 9 topics today, that's okay too. So what do you think?
Why don't we just do what John just suggested? And then
Maybe
decide
young people
whichever-
can suggest something you want to discuss
Or those guys have something.
On the topic,
a topic, yeah.
yeah, I think we could start like this idea. What is the solution? What's the issue we have like, in the public, like in this thing happening, like what is the solution? Like okay, when you say like the topic we're talking about today, so what we're gonna have like more people to get idea to the solution of this thing.
So how would you phrase it? Well, we're just gonna limit it to sexuality issues? Or is it just talking about the secular culture that it's overwhelming us? How would we phrase it?
How can the church, or how can what, Islam, I guess, in general, or whatever the Ummah, how can they, is it Ummah? Is that the,
Ummah, yeah.
Well, I think the way to start the phrase, the first half of the sentence is that how can Christians and Muslims
Address.
yeah,
act?
I don't know, this, I
Address was the issues of sexuality.
Well, do you want to limit it to that? I mean, it
almost-
really
Will
is
it
part,
not be same thing?
it's part and parcel of a whole collapse of our society.
I think you could leave it almost somewhat open of what each side would think would be societal ills, I guess it could be addressed. Because to me, there's a lot of them. I don't really know if I would even put LGBT near the top.
Address-
There's a lot of ills.
So how,
Waywardness, how to address the waywardness or disobedience to the God's command.
well, I would say collapse of the culture.
Cultural collapse, you know, or decline.
Decline, secularization of our culture, maybe that's
Yeah,
more
that might,
precise.
because it's more than just disobedience. It's also, I mean, it's disobedience that people are less happy in general. It's not like they're disobeying and having a good time of it. I think people are less happy.
Secularization sounds.
Yeah.
That's why that grips me, that survey this woman did. We don't like it, but we feel powerless to do anything about it. That grabs me. It's not like, you know, I maybe some men love it. They go out and finding women are easy, but it sounds like even a lot of them are discontent, but they feel trapped by it.
Mhm.
So it's not, that's sexuality is only one part of that, but I think the whole idea is when our culture is pulled in a certain way, how do Muslims and Christians resist the cultural pull? You know, the cultural decline.
How about the traps of Satan?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right, we do.
Maybe that's the topic we can have.
Well,
What do you think?
Yeah.
Battle.
well, here's what I wrote down. It's really long. But what can Muslims and Christians do cooperatively to counter the secularization of our culture?
Sounds right.
But that means we are saying secularization is a bad thing.
Well, if it's not godly, it's secularization.
I think that's actually a good topic. The relationship between religion and secularism,
Yeah,
and from the perspective of our individual religions. So Christianity, Christianity's relationship with secularism, Islam's relationship with secularism.
Mhm.
I think
So how would you change the wording, Sean? We
Well,
have to come up with
for
some
me,
wording.
with cooperation, to me that kind of goes away from our format here of doing presentations. To me, that's more of a discussion thing. I'm all for it, but I think it requires a different format.
So how would you rephrase it then? What can Muslims and Christians do? Or
You see it now as a debate. We're working together. So why?
not a debate, but just a discussion, because it's more of a practical thing.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Go ahead. Could you say that again?
Not necessarily a debate, but more of a discussion, because it's a practical thing. What can we do, you know?
We didn't debate today. I thought this was a discussion today. Did we? We didn't really have a debate today.
No, it's
Yeah,
not.
It would be a little different than usual. I don't think.
Sean,
It's a
Sean,
It's a
Sean, you
dialogue
said,
because two
Sean,
sides
you
like-
said, what is the Christian relationship to secularism and what is the Muslim relationship to secularism?
Yeah.
That would be the kind of topic that we both could set forth, you know, this is how we approach it.
Yeah,
How about we use this word religion and secularism? Or relations between religion and secularism?
Well, I guess kind of more theoretical.
Excuse me, some people define secularism as freedom of religion, while others define it freedom from religion.
yeah.
I think it's mostly the latter, isn't it?
I'm saying that's why some people may say this. Why do you freedom from religion, like in France?
Yeah.
They address you, you should not really wear something to identify yourself as becoming part of that religion.
Right.
That's freedom from religion. But here in the United States, women can take passport photos with wearing hijab, and it's not a problem at all. That's freedom of religion.
Yeah.
You accept that. You don't have a problem with that. France say, no, you cannot do that.
France tries to have a secular culture. We try to have a secular government, I think is the difference there.
Different definition.
Yeah.
So
You-
I thought secularism is more like including all religions,
That's why
You're
I'm
getting-
excluding all religions.
what I'm saying is, if you can say what Islam, Christianity and Islam handle or face the ills of the society.
So is the
You're getting
topic,
into the topic already.
Yeah, you are. Cultural decline. Yeah, you know,
Yeah, I was gonna say that needs to be part of the presentation, like defining the term and also the history of the term.
So we could, here, two ways to phrase it. What do we think about secularism? Or what can we do about cultural decline? Which of those are good?
I
Maybe
think
you
those are
take
two
both.
different things.
I think they're separate topics.
Sure.
Well,
Cultural
are they?
decline and then secularism, two topics.
So
yeah.
should we have two topics, one for September and one for October?
Sure. Why not?
We also suggested one a couple months ago of asceticism.
Oh,
Yes.
What is that? What do you say?
Asceticism.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all that.
We
Asceticism.
suggested it a couple months ago, asceticism,
What's that?
What is that?
Asceticism.
monasticism, or yeah.
Translate into simple English for me.
Sufism.
Asceticism is Sufism.
No,
Sufism is asceticism. It's
Roughly.
not necessarily.
it's
Well, some would say Ramadan's asceticism, isn't it? I mean, you would think. I mean, to some degree,
oh, I see.
it's
Yeah,
self-denial.
I'm wrong.
I think mysticism would be an interesting one to discuss,
That's
perhaps.
true, yeah.
Because that would include Sufism.
Mysticism is more like Sufism.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be more
yeah,
Sufism,
that's right.
not asceticism.
I have to run here in a minute, but I was in a Sunday school class this morning where they talked about honor and shame in the Bible and how that influences what's in the Bible. And we often miss that because we're in a Western individualistic culture. And I just was wondering if that might be a topic. How do we how do we think about honor and shame as, is it something that motivates people to live properly?
How would you phrase that? How should the
No.
how
What's our I don't know. Do we promote honor and shame as a motivation for proper living, something like that? But or just what in your faith, what role does honor and shame play in your faith?
okay, I'm writing.
Interesting.
I think what Hafiz said of you'd said the traps of Satan, or I mean just
did you
evil
write
in
that?
general or something.
Yeah, that's good.
Say it again.
As a topic.
Would you say evil in general, or would you specific on
Traps of Satan.
traps of Satan?
Is that included within cultural decline at the same topic, or is it a separate topic you're talking about?
It's a separate topic.
Oh, okay.
It's a separate topic, right? Traps of Satan.
I would think our ideas of that would be different. Maybe they're really similar.
It can have anything.
What are the traps of Satan?
Yeah, I agree with Adam. I think we would largely agree. I've read the Screw Tape letters, and I would largely agree with what's said there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, so I've got 5. What are the traps of Satan? What should be done about cultural decline? Secularism, asceticism. What role does honor and shame play in our religions?
I told my guys I brought here that we'd be done at 4. I think some of you guys need to get going, so. maybe
How
we-
about
Yeah, so,
Muhammad
okay.
and Jesus?
Huh?
Muhammad and Jesus together in one topic.
Have we done that a lot?
Yeah, we cannot escape this topic.
Yeah, I don't know. They aren't parallel.
Right.
We don't look at it that way.
Think of,
Okay, so
if
should
you
we
wanna do
go?
that topic,
What's that?
if you want to do that topic, then it might be better to narrow it to Jesus.
Yeah, what do the,
Jesus, we will discuss in December.
Yeah.
We discussed.
we talk about Jesus's birth always in December.
Okay.
So that's part of it. do you want-
Can we just have Jesus instead
want-
of just birth?
You wanna do that, some other time? Just Jesus?
Just Jesus in December, not the birth. I mean,
Oh, I see.
general.
Well, but that was when he was born, so that's why we do it in December.
Yeah, but it will be included, right? Yeah, you can discuss anything about Jesus.
You guys like to bring up a big one, so.
Yeah, we are running out of time, so I
And
will,
Jesus in the second coming will come and he will marry. And he will have children. That's the Islamic concept.
Oh, it's in the Qur'an, yes, kids.
Right, and we come back.
That's a hadith.
It's a hadith.
Oh, okay.
so we have 5 topics plus our normal topic for December. And we could have Jesus / Esau later, maybe after January, February. How's that?
Easter.
I thought in December we're gonna have Jesus.
Well, we could talk about it in two times.
2 times.
Because
That will
in
become like
December, it's only
duplication, I think.
it's only part of the topic. What do you think, Sean?
I'm in favor of just Jesus in general.
Yeah, I would say just one.
So why do we
Once-
think we
once-
should do that along with, in addition to the December Jesus birth?
Oh, no, I don't think we need to do it in addition.
Yeah. It together, I think.
Well, then we have one on the Prophet Muhammad.
We did one with Prophet Muhammad and it didn't go well.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we got enough.
Yeah, I think we should, put that
Anybody
one
have
on.
more ideas, just send me an email. Thank you for coming.
Is it the same email that you use to send out things?
What's that?
Is it the same email that you use to send out things?
Yeah,